Hello, can I first have a show of hands just to make sure that everybody can hear me loud and clear? Hello? Okay, so there's a couple of hands there, so I'm hoping that everything's okay, but if you've got any problems, then please get in touch with either via the chat mechanism or via the questions. Okay, so this is the third webinar that we're hosting as part of the Change Managers Network series. Today we'll be hearing from Katie Kelly, who's the Strategic Manager for the Vibrant Communities Programme within the East Ayrshire Council. Katie was actually recommended to me from our colleague Ailey McPherson, who I was speaking to on a recent support visit that we were doing. We're trying to get around all the improvement services, trying to get around all the councils and see where we can have an impact upon their change activities. So today, you might have had the handout that I sent out prior, but I would like to just welcome Katie, thank her for doing this, and if she's ready to go, then I'd like to pass on to her. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, David, and good morning, everyone. As David said, I'm Katie Kelly, and I work in East Ayrshire, and I manage the Vibrant Communities Service. I'm going to just take you through our journey over the last couple of years. It's a new service that's been developed, what we've done and why we've done it, and how it really links, I suppose, with the work around transformation that you guys are interested in. So I'm hoping that you can see the slides okay. The first slide is quite an interesting one before I move on. On the kind of bottom area, you can see some pictures about, they're actually community-led action plans. I'll talk about them in more detail, but it's really interesting to see them in these slides. These are things that are happening in our communities now, totally transformational work as a result of the new way that we're working. The bottom left-hand corner is a whole new strategic vision for a place called New Cumnock, and the local people are equally involved with us and other partners in transforming their whole village. And then the one with the railway station is actually Mauchline, and one of the aspirations of that town is to reopen their railway station. They used to have a railway halt there, and as part of kind of the people power and the plan they've been doing, they've been really working hard to influence that. It's just a wee kind of touch on what the pictures are about. I suppose from our point of view, we set out to transform our relationship with communities as part of our transformation strategy. In the same boat as all of you guys, back about 2 or 3 years ago, we recognised that we had a massive funding gap because of obviously the receipt of funding had dropped in terms of the funding available to the public sector, and we were looking at saving around about £34 million. So rather than looking at how we could save that money, what we wanted to look at right across the piece was how we might redesign our services and really try to focus on what people needed from us and how we might do that differently. It might cost less to do it, but it actually might be a better way of working. So the transforming our relationship with the communities we serve, although it's a long kind of Monty Python type kind of description, really did what it said in the tin. It was about how we changed the way we work with our communities, that made it better for us and for our communities as well. I led the work stream, so I got some time out working to the Chief Executive and the corporate management team for 18 months prior to the service being developed, really to get some time to consider the best way forward, and I'll talk to you about how we took that forward. So, you know, our reasons for doing this is clearly about dropping the funding, so backs against the wall, how can we do things differently? But also there were other really major driving factors around changes in demography. We're all experiencing that ageing population, less people who are economically active, if you like, so the whole range of things about how our population was changing and how we could predict the change into the future. And what we really had to consider was, are our services fit for the future, moving into that changing population? Also, for all of us, when we have, we're in recession, economic downturns, massive increase in demand for our services. So how do we meet that demand in a different way when some of our most vulnerable people need us most? So again, it was about how we were looking to meet demands, but actually reduce the cost of doing that. A massive thing for me, that, and really importantly, what I wanted to embed in all of this work was not just to come up with a desktop solution quite often and design something beautiful like a new structure and saving money. We actually wanted to start with a blank sheet, and I was really fortunate to get the chance to do that and take a good bit of time to genuinely actively listen to our communities and their stakeholders. it was really important that we did this, not listening with almost the answer we had ready to give them, but actually listening to understand what people were telling us about the services that we were delivering, how they could change, what that could look like in the future. So we carried out extensive engagement work. It wasn't consultation. We didn't present them with a blueprint and say, what do you think of this? We just took time out with frontline staff, with senior managers, heads of service, directors, elected members, a wide range of community groups, special interest groups, and a wide range of stakeholders, including community planning partners and others. And we spent a long time just listening, asking questions. How do things look for you just now in terms of what we deliver? How could it improve? What do we do well? How could you be more engaged in how we work together? And it was actually very, very refreshing and quite humbling at times. Some of the work I did out in communities and dark nights over the period of a year, you know, some of the best comments I had were, well, there's real time and there's East Ayrshire time. People found really frustrated sometimes about the pace and the bureaucracy that they faced when they were dealing with the council. Also, some people felt as if that they needed a single point of contact or somewhere they could really engage properly with the council and the services, that if they had an idea or a major problem or were in crisis, they could quite often be passed around the houses. And by that time, by the time they maybe get to the right person, and they got to the right person, either the idea, the kind of momentum had gone, or if it was a crisis, that the crisis had accelerated and was actually going to cost all of us more money and more distress for the people that we serve. So there was a real reality check in some of the comments that we heard. But a big thing was local people wanted to have a way of kind of engaging their way with, you know, navigating our organisation without having to go around all the houses to do that. A massive thing for us as well was about working with people shoulder to shoulder and actually realising that people are part of the solution, that we're not always the fixers, and I'll talk a wee bit more about that. So we brought a whole lot of that information back together, and in terms of how that worked, that wasn't just me as a lone band. A lot of the time it was just myself and the chief executive in a room with a small group of people, listening to what they had to say, taking note of it, feeding back to them. And over a period of 18 months, from an initial concept and then building and all that we heard, we started to develop what a new service could look like based on that. Also in East Ayrshire, right across Scotland, our inequalities gap is widening. Although we've got better in a relative term in terms of inequalities, we still have massive differences between communities that are really near each other. So we have maybe you know, in northwest Kilmarnock, the life expectancy at birth for a male is 20 years shorter than 2 miles down the road in Beansburn. And to be honest with you, whilst we've done amazing work around inequalities, and I think all of us did, you know, we made lots of funding coming to us from all different places, what we realised was a lot of what we've done is we kind of papered over the cracks, and a lot of the communities, when the funding ran out, we weren't able to give the same level of service. So what we wanted to do was come up with something very different and look at practice about reducing inequalities and building communities from across the world. And that was where some of the ideas around asset-based work started to emerge. Finally, massive drivers for change around Christie. Christie came along at the right time for us. We'd started the work, but then the Christie thing published probably about halfway through, and that really gave us the national framework to say, look, we're on the right tracks here, that we really welcomed what Christie brought, and we wanted to try and use those principles in terms of how we took our work forward, really about enabling and empowering people to change, and also supporting our most vulnerable people, but linking them into natural support. So a lot of the principles of Christie are embedded in this work. Apologies if you've seen this before, but it's my favourite slide of all time, and it's been nicked from somewhere else. But our solutions aren't always fit for purpose, and I think the point is we're really good at fixing things in public sector, we have been, and I suppose this dog is getting its outcome because it's getting a walk, but the problem is it's fairly restricted in what it does, and it can't really speed up, and it's costing quite a lot of money to put that helicopter in the air. And what we do is use this kind of work with all services across the council in terms of being more solution focused, but also working hand in hand with the people we serve and coming up with joint solutions. Just not always the people in the suits know the answer on how to fix things. So as a result of all of the work that we did, we got the opportunity to develop the Vibrant Community Service. And the Vibrant Community, the word vibrant, is kind of mentioned in our vision for our community plan, to have strong and safe and vibrant communities. We also just felt that the word vibrant really did reflect a lot of the brilliant stuff that was happening locally, but maybe we weren't celebrating enough. We try very much not to use service, and we don't often use the council logo. We've kind of changed the way we do things because we're trying to blur the roles between ourselves and the communities and the voluntary community business sectors, and we're trying to get people to work all together to come up together and jointly own the issues that we have and bring them together. So there was a conscious effort there to do things a bit differently. So whilst I manage a team of about 120 odd staff, they're very much from all services from right across the council. They came together, you know, from community learning and development, from some elements of leisure and health improvement, but we also took on into the service. We've got a senior lawyer involved, we've got an estate surveyor, so we have a whole range of people who are absolutely focused in taking this forward. So people came also from social work, so we brought in the whole supported accommodation, care coordinators, local area coordinators, and brought together a service that we felt was actually going to be front-facing and working in a different way. There's three kind of key elements to the service around early intervention and prevention, sustainable communities, and the extra bit that I got added on to my brief, which was quite a kind of challenge, but it's worked out fairly well, but was the property and estate rationalisation work stream. So whilst we're developing in one hand, we are reducing our assets in the other, although we've been working really well with communities for them to help to take on community assets, and we've approved 22 asset transfers so far within the last couple of years, so we're doing some really good work there. So the whole principles around this work is they're complementary, the services. So if we do work with our most vulnerable people, shoulder to shoulder with them, using principles of co-production and asset-based, valuing local people, recognising them as assets, recognising they've got absolute skills and talents, then actually it's about how we then take them forward. The work we're doing in sustainable communities is building a natural support where our most vulnerable people will feel welcome, and we can actually change the way people are supported naturally. And it was a big vision for us to have, and there's different elements to make it happen, but we're actually starting to break through. We've been operational now just over 2 years, and the document that you've got, that you'll get a chance to have a look at later on, kind of charts our story and lets you know some of the things that have gone well for us and some of the things that we're still working on. But we're seeing, and we're calling this a game changer. That's what our chief exec calls it. There's just a whole new way of doing things here, and it's working really, really well. We've got challenges along the way because we're changing culture. So a lot about building social networks, a lot of the Harry Burns stuff really resonated with us, about isolation, and about reciprocity and inclusion and equality, and actually building that in at the ground floor. And you can see there in the scales there, it's really not all about us intervening and services being provided, but much more about natural connections. So if we were looking at the kind of general scope of what we've been trying to do, we're kind of trying to move away from the stuff in the left-hand column, moving away from the present policy about focusing on deficiencies, what's wrong with that community or that person and how do we fix them, actually focusing on what's good about that place and how we grow it, looking at identifying opportunities and trying to move away from that whole failure demand, we're responding to problems in different ways. We've moved very far away from grants, but although we have brilliant relationships with some of the big funders, we're avoiding taking money that runs out. So we're actually trying to work much more in an investment way. So we're working with some big funders in a different way. We've just entered into a strategic partnership with Lloyd's TSB Foundation, where it isn't about a bag of money, but it's about us working shoulder to shoulder with them and the local community to take work forward and to bring in inward investment to that community. So it's a really different model that we're taking forward. Again, it's about power balance, massively important that we see ourselves as equal with communities. I think there's always this thing about professionals know more and communities know less, but I think when we do a lot of the work with other departments and partners, we explain that, of course, when we all go home at night, we're the community and we shut the door, so why should we be something different to work? So we also recognise that when people all put their heads together across the piece, that better solutions emerge, and we're definitely seeing that happening. Again, moving away from people as clients and customers and much more into citizens and neighbours and co-producers, people who own and who care about their community or their addiction or their health condition, and actually about how we work with them to change things positively. And really much more enabling than actually delivering. And if you can see the side bit there, this is always a bit difficult for the west of Scotland because it's self-deprecating, but we've done an awful lot of work on the gifts of the head and the hand and the heart. And this is very much steeped in asset-based community development, but I mean, my background isn't community development, people think it is, and so it's that we found this really, really important with our own staff for our workforce planning. So when we were putting people, working with them to go into the positions of the new structure, we had quite a lot of new positions. So I was able to work with people and actually talk to them about what they felt their gifts were. And what we did find is that there were some people we had who had been working for us for years in a kind of policy type role or very kind of procedural, but they were actually creatives. And that when we discovered that and were able to put them into roles where they really excelled, because a lot of what staff told us when we were doing the listening events is that they were feeling they had to be risk averse, and that they were feeling that there was more they wanted to do, but they didn't feel they had the permissions to do it. So we have got a kind of license, as long as we don't break the law, to make things work as best we can in partnership with our communities and the people we serve. So we try and overcome red tape, but the staff have to be empowered at every level to do that. And again, just working with and not doing things to people, but actually working alongside them. Again, about social connectedness, we were really interested in this from Harry Burns' point of view, particularly with the ageing population that we have in East Ayrshire, and that really what we didn't want to do is medicalise the work we were doing along with the Health and Social Care Partnership, or avoid it as much as possible. So we've been very much focusing on social connectedness. We've developed in our sheltered housing, it used to be called sheltered housing, it's supported housing, kind of older people's hubs, but they've become real places where everyone from the community can go. There's a fish supper night, there's karaoke, there's trips to the races, there's Elvis impersonators. I do employ someone who's a care coordinator who's a really good Elvis impersonator who performs all over the world. But the point here is that they're then forming their own social committees, and people are actually taking responsibility for their own activities. And actually we're finding people who are actually connected socially live longer, healthier and happier, and that research is really, really deeply kind of entrenched, and what we've been trying to do is make the conditions right for that kind of work to happen. Community-led action plans is the work around we've been doing to try and change the way that we interface with communities. Although we have a really strong community planning partnership, it is fairly strategic, probably the same in a lot of you guys, and yes, there are links with the community, but what we were interested in was almost inverting that, flipping the model, and actually getting communities to lead their own kind of aspirations and actually push from the bottom up, if you like, and push at us as an organisation to change the way we do things. So community-led action planning process, although it's a process that we are doing and we work hand in hand with communities to develop, it is very, very different, the outcome of it in every community, and so it should be, because our communities are all very different. And it's our aspiration to have 30 odd of these plans by 2017. We have 11 launched, and it has absolutely been game-changing in terms of our relationship with communities and the work we're all progressing together. And we're about to launch 4 more, one for Kilmarnock Town Centre, which has been very interesting, because it's not just been about traders, it's been about the churches that are around there, the voluntary sector, the people who come there. So actually it's talking about equal stakeholders using space to best effect. So the way the plans work is we've allocated a community worker who each has 3 small communities, and they're the key link person for that person, that community into the council and out of the council. And that community worker can access all areas. They can pick up the phone and they can phone ahead of service. They've got permissions to make things happen for communities and make the connections. Initially, a group come together, they encourage more people to come. They prepare a stakeholder survey, and the community themselves deliver that to every door in the neighbourhoods. And then they keep going back and back until they get at least 40% response rate from the community. It's really important to us that the community then have a mandate to talk for the community and hear their views. Thereafter, they develop a community profile. We assist them with that, but they look different in every community as well, because it could be about the declining industry or their assets. There's a whole range of different things. And then they have a big open event where people come along, analyse the questionnaires that they've completed from across the community, and people come and vote on what the priorities are for them. And those events are really exciting. You know, we've been getting like 300, 400, 500 people turning out at those events. We would never get something like that, our chief exec would say, unless we were shutting something. So it's been amazing, the turnout. People come and vote, but there's usually local people performing. There's a really good festival atmosphere, so the event is used as a way to bind the community and for people to meet that hadn't met before. And thereafter, after the voting event, an action plan's developed by the steering group that represents the community, and then it's published and launched. And the launch events have been very powerful for us, because the community presents, they're on the stage, they've got the PowerPoint, and council people and others and the rest of the community are in the audience, and they're hearing from the community about how they want to go forward. And I suppose the big thing for us isn't about them then handing us the action plan and saying, council, do that for us. It's them recognising that we can all do things together. And the action plan would be, well, what can people locally do for themselves? And then the next question might be, what would they be able to do with our help? So what assistance can we give? Is it training? Can we get litter pickers in? Can we bring a skip in at a certain time if it's a community clean-up? How can we introduce funding into there and get businesses involved? So it's a totally different thing. And then also, what should the council be doing anyway? And a lot of what's happened is we don't have extra money, but we've actually been able to kind of change the way we do things responding to this. So we might, do less of something and more of something else to satisfy that. The process is fantastic though, because it's our way forward. It's 5-year plans. We've got 11 in place. We will have 30 in place by 2017. And already we're changing the way we do things, but we're absolutely changing the way we engage with communities. And the business sector have really embraced this as well. Local businesses are part of the planning process and part of the investment, even if it's tins of paint at times, but there is a feeling of a real cohesion happening within the community. So the key things that we've seen so far coming out of this process is we've got more people joining groups that were there already, many more people, not the usual suspects, now involved in shaping the future of the community. We've seen many more faces, because for a long while you'll all have known the community activists who were around, that some of them are still there, but there's been a real change in the people who are there, and that's been probably because of the surveys and people going to the doors and talking to people. New organisations have created. A lot of the groups that now have an action plan and the communities that have them have formed as a SKIO, so they're taking things forward for themselves with some amazing projects and programmes emerging from the steering groups themselves. The capacity has increased, and also using the skills and talent stuff that I talk about, we've unearthed a whole lot of real professional help and skills and talents within communities that we didn't previously know about, and help to make that active to take this forward. Also, there's a big shift of reaction to proactive kind of behaviour, so instead of complaining about things, it's about what can we do together to change that, and that's been very positive. And the thing about this is equal partners. When we went out to talk about this initially, it was like, yeah, we've got to save £34 million, but actually, we're all in this together, and this is the resource that we have, so how do we do this together? How do we make this change together? So it was trying to get an ownership, and I think that's slowly starting to happen. Also, what we're finding, because there's a really strong action plan and it's absolutely focused on the community. I mean, the council doesn't monitor it, it's not our plan, it's not got our logo on it. But I suppose the big thing is then that funders and other kind of investors and partners have started to figure out how they can engage differently with communities, because they've stated their aspirations and where they want to go. So a big strong link with business and key funders. So rather than actually, applying for applications for funds now, we were actually doing much more strategic work with funders and actually kind of hand to hand. We've got Big Lottery in one community doing our place too, and we've got Lloyd's in another, working on a different approach that we're kind of working with them on. And then we've got a big investment from Dumfries House through the Prince of Wales in a couple of communities as well. These are some of the things that the communities have said, and there's more in the book. I don't want to go into all the results, because I've given you, our wee document that we've done 2 years on. It just gives you a feel. This is really genuine stuff. The people that have been working in community development that I now manage, it wasn't my background before, they feel it's game changing too. Their relationships changed. You're the go-to person, but also there's a lot more trust developing. And we've seen some amazing champions emerging from communities that just haven't had a voice before. In terms of early intervention, I won't go through all of these, but we complementing the work we're doing in communities and building those natural supports. It's important that we still focus very much on our most vulnerable groups and try and do things differently to kind of save on the investment that we have, because we have some families that are very vulnerable who cost a whole lot of money to work with on a regular basis when they're in crisis, but also the outcomes for them isn't all that good. So we have a prison locally, a private prison, so we're in the prison 4 or 5 days a week working with prisoners and their families, because we do know from statistics that if you're the son or daughter of someone who's been incarcerated, you're 60% more likely to offend. So we do a lot of bonding work in the prison with families, and there's a whole range of things that happen there. We work a lot with men in terms of role models in the family through our play team, and we do work with looked after and accommodated young people a whole range of different things around befriending. And a lot of what we do though is very much, it's very much about early intervention and prevention. We know that if we put something in upstream, it changes the outcome into the future for the individual. We've got really good evidence of that emerging, particularly in our MEND programme, which is around childhood obesity. And although it started out looking just to reduce the BMI of some of our most overweight young people, actually it's turned into a place where families are supporting each other, and it's basically constituted and run by parents and families now with our support, but it's making a massive difference to some of the most vulnerable families' lives. We are very integrated in the work with the Health and Social Care Partnership, so we deliver a lot with them around children and families in the home with some of the most vulnerable families and within the community. In terms of our kind of youth work, we do a lot of work around youth voice, and we recognise that we really do want to politicise young people one way or the other. And certainly we had a really brilliant turnout. We did a lot of work in schools to encourage young people to vote in the referendum. We do feel that that poll has stayed up, and we do feel that more young people are engaged in community life. I think one of our biggest indicators is a community council has recently been taken over, and the chair is 20 years of age. Now, that's a quarter of the average age of most chairs of community council, so we're really starting to see a shift in terms of youth voice. But we also do a lot of diversionary work as well, closely working with the police and really taking young people on who are probably some of the most vulnerable and letting them work alongside us through Modern Apprentice or a whole range of different things. So that work has been amazing in terms of how we've been able to engage in a much wider, different way with young people. In terms then of the kind of lifestyle older people and wellbeing, again, a whole range of programmes. Falls prevention we do very carefully. We know that we had a big issue with falls in Ayrshire and Arran, and East Ayrshire has a programme that we work alongside the NHS with around invigorate, motivate and activate. And it's people who have fallen or have fear of falling, at risk of falling. And if you're being cold and calculated, it costs about 25 grand for a hip replacement. So what we want to avoid is that happening. But also we know that if someone falls, their whole quality of life changes. So it's a big, big programme now, the Falls programme, and it's now got different tiers in it, and it's also linking with other health conditions. And actually we have a whole network of older people now calling themselves Young at Heart, where they come together for different events, social events, and it's a wide kind of East Ayrshire wide kind of approach that we have around older people and trying to really combat loneliness and isolation, as I discussed earlier on. We do a lot of the work you'd expect to see around mental health and recovery. We work with people in recovery from addictions, and we also do a whole range of work around multi-morbidity. We're about to develop some more work there. So although we are not in the Health and Social Care Partnership, we deliver a lot of programmes to our most vulnerable people on behalf of the partnership, and we've got a great relationship there with them. So really for us then, if we've embedded that whole asset-based approach within the work that we do, and it's really genuinely happened, bringing that service together, and the people that we brought together, it was quite, ropey at first because people came from different backgrounds, some very corporate, some much more kind of risk averse, and some of them much more into being community based. So I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years really developing the workforce, and all of us starting to understand together how we serve people, and really focusing on that whole idea of servant leadership and leadership throughout our organisation. It's not the management, but we've got leaders at every level of the programmes and services that we run, and we're seeing a sea change in terms of the staff working together for things, just bringing those kind of people together, those professionals for the first time they hadn't met. The outcomes for local people are way better because they are now being able to connect better and really add value by bringing services together. So we're seeing some real breakthrough work starting to happen. So for us, it's about leading transformational change and changing culture. I spend a lot of time with other council departments right across the piece, housing, OD, some of the social work services, run workshops around asset-based work, solution-focused, and trying to get us all moving in the same direction. And so that's been a big piece of work, that we're not just regarded as a service, but as an influencer to change our whole organisation. Big focus much more in people, relationships and connections, always in bricks and mortar and pounds and pence. We actually recognise the importance of people and relationships and connections, both professionally, across services and in our communities, and with public and voluntary and the wider sectors, the churches sector as well, playing a big role in this work. Big thing about reducing bureaucracy and red tape, and really, if you're back to Christie, getting rid of that failure demand thing, finding a way to say yes if it's legal and make it happen, and encouraging creativity. We've kind of made, we're all in quite a difficult position here about reduced funding, and what we've realised is that actually it's a time for creatives, a time for people now to come up with ideas that may not have been listened to before but are fantastic. So there is a big feeling of creativity in trying things and making them happen, and not just focusing this as a pilot. This is actually, we've done this work now, we're not going to change, we are on this road, and we're not going to go back to what we did before. Again, about equalising and strengthening relationships and blurring the roles between community, voluntary, public sector, business sector, unlocking skills and talents and recognising that everybody's got them and that they're sometimes hidden, and then moving beyond the rhetoric. So it isn't just all about theory for us. We've been out and about now working for 2 years. We're seeing a big change. There's been massive challenges and we've got the bruises because sometimes we're the pioneers, but it's been definitely worthwhile. Overall, this programme has saved about £690,000 for the council. The savings have been there. No one's had compulsory redundancy, but I think everyone in the service that I have would say that we have a better service now. And then just finally, we're really into quotes here. We get a bit mad on them, and apologies, it's the final slide, but that this is what we talk to communities about, that sometimes, the people that say it will never happen or it won't work, it's actually realising that a small group of thoughtful people can really make big changes, and we're seeing that happen. And in terms of early intervention and prevention, we really want to try and change the labels of people, that they don't become the person who was the addict or the person that stole from them, but the person that helped to build the local boxing club, or the person who has additional support needs, who can paint and draw in an amazing way. So it's actually about how we get people to change the labels and be accepted by their own community. So that's a kind of whistle stop tour. As I say, we've given you a copy of the PDF, and more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Kate. It was very informative. We've got a couple of questions just coming in here. I'm just going to try, we've got first ones from Alan Mooney. I'm going to try unmute him and see if he can ask it himself, or I'll see if that works. Hello, Alan. Hello, Alan.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Hi, Katie. Thanks very much. That was very inspiring. Thanks. You mentioned about the rebranding and not using the council branding. Did this bring any resistance from existing staff or the council staff, if you like?
Yeah, it was a different thing to do at the time. What we did though is I sat down with our PR team and did a similar presentation to them and explained what we were trying to achieve, and explained that we were really trying to come up with something that, we weren't trying to disown the council in any way, but we wanted people to be able to kind of almost gather under the banner. So, by working as a couple of really brilliant people from our PR team, both from a kind of editorial point of view, but also a design point of view, that we're able to say they totally understood what we were trying to do, explain to them about asset-based work. Don't get me wrong, Vibrant Communities is known to be a council service, but also now have community groups standing up saying they're from Vibrant Communities as well. So yeah, a lot of what we've had to do is a challenge, I suppose, and that one, what it's always like, everything's got to be corporate. And there's certainly times when I'm told to be corporate and I'll be corporate, but this now has almost grown arms and legs, and people use the kind of logo. A lot of our publications now, there's just as much stuff that the community delivers in it than we deliver, so it's only right that we kind of don't kind of attribute it to one person or the other. But yeah, it was a challenge, but I think getting people on board and those connections with other staff in the council has helped us.
Thanks, Katie. Brilliant.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Just either raise your hand or type in the question box at the side. I was just wondering, Katie, you mentioned that you've been doing a lot of work with sort of housing and social work across the council. Have those services realised any benefits as a result of your programme, or do they now use that as to write in as part of their service plans or their team plans?
Yeah, we've had some real changes. I think not everybody's, it's supposed like any kind of transformation, not everyone's always going to buy into it. What we've seen though is some real champions emerging from some of those services. So recently the Town Centre Action Plan, housing were so closely involved with us in delivering that, because town centre living is a big, kind of big aspiration for us. So, a senior manager from housing was working alongside me and taking that work forward. And interestingly, a big piece of work that we've seen a big change in is around the sheltered housing accommodation. There's a lot of input to our staff there, but we've also got social services staff, health and social care and housing. And basically it was getting people around the table and saying, okay, let's change how we do this. Let's put the people who live there first. I know that sounds really, but you get so caught up in procedures and health and safety, and figure out what we could do together to make that experience better for them. So we led a review for doing that across the piece, and it's been massively good and people have really embraced it. So yeah, I would say some of the work we're doing around befriending and in children's houses and supporting families is certainly saving money for social work, because they're able to kind of refer people on to us and we work hand in hand. So we would get individual young people or families referred to us, but not in a kind of formal reference way, but to say, look, can you do this differently? And we're actually finding that those kind of approaches are really working in terms of everyone going down a formal kind of social work route or medical route if you come into health and social care. So yeah, we are seeing differences and we've got good relationships formed there as well. People are starting to trust us more and more, and we're the go-to person for a lot of staff now. Not everyone, but we're starting for that to happen.
Thank you very much, Katie. Just got another question here from Miriam McKenna. I'll just try unmute you if I can. Hi Miriam.
Hi there.
Hi, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, sure. It was just, Katie, you'd said about the communities owning the plans and the service doesn't monitor them, and I was just wondering if you could go into a wee bit more detail about that. Knowing that we kind of have to report back up to Scottish Government or whatever about community planning and things like that. It was just interesting to know, how the communities sort of then take that ownership, and is there any resistance to sort of not knowing necessarily that the service is recording performance and things like that?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, and it's one that came up early doors for us, because there was a wee bit of pressure put me to kind of bring back a monitoring framework from the plans, and I really resisted that with our corporate management team here. So basically we've got community planning arrangements and we've got a community plan with a capital C and a capital P, and there's key actions in that, and it's usually across the partners, the kind of strategic partners in terms of health, police, etc., the council, and what we'll deliver. These community-led action plans are almost like the grassroots version of that. So they do interface with community planning, but they're not formally, you wouldn't see the word outcome much mentioned in them. There's clear actions in them about what people want to achieve over the 5 years, and the communities touch base. Some of them are having a newsletter out to see how they're doing things. Most of them are running an annual event a year in to say, here's what we've done so far, and they hold that for the whole community and they can show how they're doing. And so the way we capture it is, I'll get the community workers to work with the community, and they'll tell us the things they want us to say that they've achieved over the last wee while. And what our chief execs become more interested in is not about the monitoring, but where there's blockages, where maybe the council, maybe the community's hit a brick wall somewhere or something they wanted to do. And she now is more keen to hear from that to say that, okay, is there a way we can help to take this forward? So they're very much, I can send a link out to you also, you can go and have a look at the plans and how they're done. They're designed by the community, and they've got very clear actions and projects that they want to do. And what we've found is we've said to them, right, it's up to you how you decide to report on them, but you need to show that you're making progress to the rest of your community, because that's more that you're accountable to. So it's been a totally different way of doing things. We did have a business connector in who was kind of a senior executive from Greg's. We got him for a year, and he worked with the communities to help them develop a kind of project management approach for their plans. And he used the same techniques as they used in changing the filling for the big softie in Greg's. So basically, so it's using business kind of approaches, and the communities have adopted that kind of community project management approach, and they'll share with us what progress they're making. But more importantly, they'll share it with their community and show that the community voted for things to happen and how are things going. So there's been quite a few kind of update events. There was a 6-month one just a wee while ago, and another community had a mid-term with the Wellington plan's been going for about 2.5 years, and that was fantastic because everybody turned out from the council and all the community, and the steering group were able to show that they'd really achieved about 2/3 of the things that they'd set out to do. So it's a softer way of monitoring, but you'll not see an outcome in sight.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
That's lovely. We've just got another question in from Stephen Fraser from Midlothian Council. I'll just try and unmute you, Stephen. Oh. Hello, Stephen. Okay, so Stephen's question was, having sat in gyms at night with one person there, can I ask for more detail on attendance and participation levels? Also been there where we're suggesting a closure and seen the attendance levels rise.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing more people turning out because the community are leading this. So, a steering group comes together out of a whole range of groups and individuals. That's the first part of the process. And then it kind of invigorates because they're around every door, the chap every door in the place and keep going. So what happens is, because it's not a council, there's not a whole top table of suits sitting there coming to tell a community something, it's actually local people that they know that are leading it and are enthused about it. That's why we think more people have turned out. Also, it's the Cormac Russell stuff, if you have a meeting, it's whether it's attractive to people to come, and a lot of the community work that's been happening, that's been community-led, it's been a really kind of a community celebration. So quite often when they do have an event for voting or getting people together, they also have, maybe the local school performing and doing their choir, or they've got some older people doing some stuff, so actually it becomes much more attractive to attend. But yeah, the attendances have been massively bigger than anything as a council we'd have seen if we'd done a public meeting. I have been leading in community asset transfer, and that has meant that though we have had to close some facilities or to work with communities to take them on, and that's been quite difficult. But what we're finding is where a community has a community-led action plan, I'm able to sit down with them around the table with the sleeves rolled up and say, okay, things need to change here because we've got 4 facilities, you don't need 4 anymore, maybe your population's changed. How can we do things differently? And we've got some brilliant projects where, one community, we're moving 5 of our community facilities, the library, the games hall, the community centre, a couple of other ones, all into the wing at the school, and the community are going to run that, but we're paying over £1 million to make the thing happen, but I'll make that back in revenue savings, so we're going from 5 community facilities to 1. But that conversation could never have happened if we hadn't engaged communities in this different way. It would have been more burning torches, if you like. So I suppose once we find that the communities have an understanding of where I'm coming from, and then I understand where they're coming from, it's a much more equal conversation about how we do difficult things together.
That's all, Katie, thank you very much. And the next question's from Lindsay from Fife Council. I'll just try and unmute you. Hello, Lindsay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks.
Hi,
yep.
Can you hear me? Hi. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for that, Katie. That's been really interesting. My question was around the private investment and attracting that in, so for inward investment for the communities. I think that's really promising. How has that worked in terms of, meeting what the council needs for their sort of regulations, maintaining their reputation, but also for fitting between what the community need and their terms and conditions of funding from, say, like the Lloyd's TSB Foundation?
Really, really interesting question. So what we were keen to do was to try and blur the lines a wee bit between the business sector and communities, because quite often if you go and ask a business what to do, that you never really tell them what it is you want. You just want a bag of money. So the businesses had said that to us, and we worked quite closely with economic development and our own local businesses to see how they might engage. So on a very local level for local businesses, it's worked a bit like this. They've been part of the community-led action plan process, so there's a stakeholder element, a business element to this process, where the actual community interview all the stakeholders. Now, if that's in a wee town or village, that can often be the local pharmacy or the newsagent in the shops. And what's happened, because the community, the businesses rely on the local people to use them, I think in some places, or they live locally, they felt compelled to invest in some way. The investment has been in one community where after the launch, one of them just gave them 50 litres of paint to do some stuff, where other places it's been they've given them a business premises and designed a website for them or sponsored some of the areas. So that's a more local approach with local businesses. But the work we're doing with Lloyds is fascinating, and we're hoping to share that across Scotland. It's quite early, but what we're doing with Lloyds TSB Foundation is, I recognised with them I didn't want them to hand us money for communities that would run out, and they were feeling the same way as well. It's kind of place-based, how do we invest differently? So what we've done there, a wee bit like Lottery or Place 2, but Lloyds is going to be a bit different. They've employed a member of staff who works hand in hand with my member of staff, same salary, everything. We've recruited them jointly. They're the employer, but it's a local guy, he's based down here. So I've got a community worker there, community enabler, and Lloyds have got their person. So that's the team for this area of Cumnock. So we're using Cumnock as the example. So we'll still go through the community-led action plan process in Cumnock like we've done with all the rest of it. But what Lloyds are watching is to see, okay, what comes out of the plan, how do we engage with people, and then they plan to either to look at the plan and look to see how they as an organisation can invest in elements of work that the communities have identified, but also they're going to be introducing the community of Cumnock to investors that they know, some of them from the south of England that we would never have hoped to have brought up there. So they hope to bring in some investment when the plan's developed kind of alongside it. So it's having the action plan has allowed businesses to actually say, okay, we can't help with that, but we could do this bit. And so it could be local businesses that are some of the bigger ones. It's varied from place to place. So that's kind of how we've done it. And what we're trying to do is where investment comes from external funding. So Lloyds are not getting hung up in outcomes and monitoring or anything like that. They're trying something different here. And their plan is, when we've had a go at it here, they want to then spread it in some of their other cold spots across Scotland, the approach, if you like. So it's very place-based. It's about communities identifying what they want to happen. It's about them happy to lead it and take it forward. And then Lloyds giving their own resource where it's appropriate, but also making the right introductions for that community and making introductions to wider networks and connections that they have for investment. There's so many examples of business investment here that we would never have seen before. As I say, small scale from tins of paint to us having a qualified business advisor working with us for a year. And most recently, we've just been, some of the others of you might be aware of this, but there's the kind of Healthy High Streets programme, and we now are kind of on board very closely with Marks and Spencer's, EE, Santander, and a few other big corporates in our town centre. So it's actually how we work differently, and I do think having a plan that is demonstratively coming from the community or the stakeholders really helps that process for the business community to engage differently.
Okay, so if there's not any questions, then I'd like to thank Katie very much for her presentation today. There's been a lot of really good feedback from the end there as well. As I mentioned at the start, this was a recorded session, and I will pass on information on how to access the recording. It will be shared via the Change Managers Network Scotland Knowledge Hub group. So if you're not a member of that, then you can either contact me directly or you can join via the Knowledge Hub. This is also a sort of monthly series, so the next webinar will be on the 11th of September, and will be on the socialisation of change, about how we can use social media to engage with our communities and really push forward and make use of that as a tool. So once again, I'd like to thank Katie very much, and thank you very much for your attendance today, and hopefully see you again at the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.